They are mysterious stories that have captured the imaginations of UFO believers and sparked covert government investigations.
It was a gigantic object, 300 meters in diameter. It made very strange aerial maneuvers.
But these are not celebrated American paranormal incidents. These UFO episodes took place in a country for years, shrouded in secrecy.
Behind the scenes, the Russian government, the Russian military take this phenomena very seriously. They've been lying directly to their own people.
May 2002. In a remote area 100 miles outside of Moscow, an investigative team from Kosmopoisk, a group that studies UFO sightings, searches for signs of UFO activity.
We are going to enter the forest. This is the place pointed out by local people to be the destination of different types of UFOs.
Soviet ufologists have been active since the 1960s. They claim that for decades, thousands of citizens have witnessed the appearance of unexplainable objects in the skies over Mother Russia. Today, ufologists in Russia work in the open and report their findings freely. This was not always the case. Before the policy of glasnost was introduced in 1985, independent investigations of UFOs in the former Soviet Union were conducted in a climate of secrecy and fear. At times, official government policy denied the existence of UFOs and any UFO activity, and prohibited anyone from reporting otherwise.
The UFO research in the former Soviet Union was a very complicated matter because one had to deal with overall state secrecy.
Meanwhile, the Soviet government was involved in covert UFO investigations of its own.
We know that the Russian government studied this secretly for a period of 40 years. We know that they took it very seriously. We also know that there have been various attempts, including more recent ones, to put a spin on this to say, there's nothing to it. That's a bunch of baloney.
The results of the Soviets' most far-reaching secret UFO study became public in the year 2000. The inquiry started in 1978 and took 13 years to complete. The investigative team consisted of top scientists and military experts and was completely clandestine.
Certainly, this collaboration between the Academy of Sciences and the Ministry of Defense was not paraded. I mean, formally, these studies were closed. Classified organizations took part in these studies. This research should have a secret character.
Colonel Boris Sokolov was the coordinator of the investigation. Shortly after the fall of the Soviet Union, he met with American investigative journalist George Knapp.
Sokolov told us that just as in America, 90 to 95% of these cases could be explained away, but the remaining 5 to 10% could not be easily explained.
The 13-year Soviet UFO study scrutinized some of the most puzzling sightings in Russian history. In 1968, a cameraman documenting a test of a Soviet jet fighter noticed a huge triangular object in the sky. He focused his camera on the object and caught it on film. In 1977, an unusual aerial display sent tentacles of light streaming down over the town of Petrozavodsk. Some claim the event caused fine holes to be glazed in glass windows and concrete. In 1982, military personnel at an intercontinental ballistic missile base witnessed several brilliantly lit orbs overhead. Seconds later, a warning light indicated a missile had switched to the prepare to launch mode. Had an alleged UFO come close to starting a nuclear attack? UFO sightings over Russia are not limited to the recent past. Reports of peculiar-looking airborne objects date back centuries. However, no formal investigations were undertaken until the early 20th century, when an event of epic proportions demanded analysis. Tunguska, July 30th, 1908. In a remote area of Siberia, the morning calm was rocked by an explosion. The powerful blast was heard 1,000 miles away.
There was an enormous firewall blast, something on the order of 15 megatons of equivalent energy, which is roughly 1,000 times that of the Hiroshima blast at the end of the Second World War. This was an extraordinary event.
Because of the remoteness of the Tunguska region, it was almost 20 years before any government researchers visited the site. The first expedition to reach Tunguska was headed by Russian mineralogist Leonid Kulik.
When the initial expedition got to the Tunguska area in 1927, the natives were reluctant to show the scientists into the region because they thought the god Agdi had devastated the area because of the wickedness that was going on, and he had destroyed the trees, killed the animals.
Kulik eventually convinced locals to direct him to the blast location. Believing a meteorite had caused the massive explosion, Kulik assumed he would find a crater at the point of the meteorite's impact. To his surprise, there was none.
He looked for meteorite samples on the ground because often when an object hits the Earth, it throws up debris, and the debris is recoverable around the edges of the crater. But of course he didn't find that either.
What Kulik discovered has stirred UFO debate for decades. At the blast's epicenter was a frozen swamp with an untouched clump of fully grown trees in the middle. Circled around the grove, 10 million dead trees lay in a symmetrical ring, seemingly mowed down by a cosmic scythe.
So here we have an enormous blast site with no crater, no fragments or meteorites around the rim of the crater, and this radial pattern of burnt trees knocked down for some 20 miles in all directions.
In the years that followed, others traveled to Tunguska to study the unusual occurrence.
There might have been fruits obtained by labors of another expedition sent by the head of the Soviet secret police in the late 1940s. But all we know is that such expedition existed. We do not know what has happened to the items and the information it collected.
Further baffling ufologists were reports of radiation damage in the Tunguska blast region.
There were also some reports of mutations taking place in plant life, and even some humans apparently suffered some gene damage.
In 1947, Russian Army Colonel Alexander Kazantsev developed a remarkable theory based on information about the devastating consequences of America's atomic bomb attacks on Japan.
He was listening to the report about the nuclear bombardment. The announcer gave a very long and very detailed description of how and in which direction trees, houses had fallen, and so on, how everything was hit. He realized that what had happened in Hiroshima, exactly the same happened at Tunguska, only nearly half a century ago.
Kazantsev hypothesized that the nuclear-like devastation seen at Tunguska must have been caused by the crash of a nuclear-powered alien spacecraft. But the scientific community rebuffs the UFO theory. Scientists claim the Tunguska explosion was caused by a rare but explainable natural event. They believe an asteroid dropped to just 3 miles above the Earth's surface and then exploded.
As the object came in, it was being decelerated and squeezed by atmospheric forces. It blew up with the force of a hydrogen bomb. The shock wave smashed down the forest, knocking trees away from the blast and resulting in a pattern away from ground zero.
But how would an asteroid explosion explain the reports of radiation damage in the Tunguska area? Scientists say it can be attributed to the sheer magnitude of the explosion.
As we mentioned before, the blast itself was 1,000 times greater than the Hiroshima blast at the end of World War II. The blast would have generated a series of very high-speed charged particles and would have been the cause of some of the mutations in the gene structures of plants and animals.
But to this day, scientific explanations do not satisfy many ufologists.
I have been several times to the place where the Tunguska body fell. I intentionally call it body, not meteorite. I mean, the catastrophe of an asteroid, of a comet, or of any other natural body cannot lead to such consequences.
A number